The Bone Hour, Part 2. Chapter 14, The Kill Switch. The voice recorder was hidden behind Portrait 3, The Watcher. Victor noticed it first by the way the canvas hung slightly away from the wall, the frame imperfectly flush. He moved the painting aside carefully. There, embedded in the cracked stone, was a small recess. Inside, a silver voice recorder. Old. Analog. No markings. Only a strip of black tape on the back. Etched with a single letter. E. He turned it over in his hand. The device had no buttons to skip, no timestamp. Only play. He pressed it. A soft click. And then, a voice. Not the killer. Not Violet. Not a stranger. Victor, if you're hearing this, it means I've failed. The voice was male. Familiar. Low. Thoughtful. Edged with resignation. Victor froze. Do you know what I realized? It was never about the bodies. Not the arrangements. Not the patterns. It was about the decision to make them. Choice is the final cruelty. We are told we have it. And then life writes itself over us anyway. But you taught us to unwrite the parts that didn't fit. Mariana stared. Who is that? Victor's throat was dry. I don't know, he whispered. But he did. The voice continued. The first time I watched you speak, you said pain could be symmetrical. That some suffering had shape. That if a mind breaks in the right direction, it doesn't collapse. It reconfigures. Do you remember saying that? I do. I always did. And now, they do too. Another pause. This time the tape hissed. Faintly, in the background, the sound of breathing. Not the speakers. More than one person. A roomful. Whispers layered together like a choir tuning itself in the dark. And then, click. The tape continued. You don't remember me, Victor. But I remember you. You once called me a ghost with blood in its veins. That was poetic. But I stopped bleeding a long time ago. Victor shut the player off. Hands shaking. He sat down hard on the gallery floor. Mariana knelt beside him. Who was that? Victor looked up. Eyes full of something not quite fear. His name was Elias Renner. A student. One I never reported missing. Why? Because I didn't know he was gone. Victor opened his journal again, tearing through pages until he found it, a list he'd once made of students who had challenged him, who had pushed back in strange, insightful ways. Elias Renner was circled. Beside it, a comment he'd scribbled in irritation. Fragmented mind. Too brilliant. Unstable. Wants to rebuild the world in reverse. And then he remembered. One afternoon, a note on his office door. Thank you for the key. I'll see what it opens. He thought it was metaphorical. Now he wasn't so sure. Back in the portrait room, the tape started playing again on its own. Just 4 words this time. Spoken softly. Not by Elias. By Violet. He still hears us. Chapter 15, The Mirror That Named Him. The chamber was buried beneath Heidelberg University's Department of Behavioral Sciences. Level -2. Accessible only through a rusting freight elevator that hadn't worked in years, until Victor pressed the button at 3 a.m., and the doors slid open like a mouth that had been waiting to speak. He stepped in alone. Mariana stayed behind, watching from the stairwell, her voice taut. You said you helped design this place. I did. 10 years ago. Before Violet. Before everything. What was it for? Reflections. Real-time response therapy. We studied how people react when watched by versions of themselves. He stepped into the elevator. And what did you learn? The doors closed before he could answer. The chamber was still intact. A circular room with mirrored walls from floor to ceiling, arranged in soft, concave arcs to distort depth and perception. The light came from beneath the floor, dim, amber, pulsing like breath. Victor stood at the center. His cane tapped the ground once. The reflections didn't match the sound. In front of him, one mirror flickered. The surface shimmered like disturbed water. And then it spoke. Not with a voice, but with letters, scratched onto the glass from inside. They formed slowly, as if etched by invisible hands. A name appeared. Anselm Vane. Victor froze. He hadn't heard that name in decades. Not since he was 16. Not since the last time he tried to forget who he was before becoming Dr. Victor Brandt. That's not possible, he whispered. The mirror responded. The name changed. 3 more names appeared, slowly, one over the other. Anselm Vane. Brandt, V. Witness _0. Victor stumbled back, heart hammering. No one knows that term. But someone did. He had used it once, in a private journal, never published. The first time he described Violet's spiral transformation. She doesn't act like the subject. She acts like the architect. I'm not observing her. I'm the one being watched. I am the witness 0. Then, without warning, the mirror shattered. Not outward, inward. Like it was swallowed. Each mirrored shard flew toward the center of the chamber, forming a loose, floating spiral that hovered above Victor's head. He reached out. Touched the nearest shard. And saw Violet's face reflected in it, smiling. But not warmly. You looked away. But we never stopped watching. Behind him, he heard his own voice. You were never supposed to return here. He turned. And saw a reflection of himself. But not present day. Not older. Not wiser. Younger. Hair darker. Posture straight. Eyes alive with arrogance. Wearing the same coat he had the day Violet disappeared. Victor stepped forward, whispering. I remember now. You were the version of me that opened the door. The mirror version smiled. And you're the one who shut it. The spiral of glass shattered into dust. And where it fell, a new message had formed, scratched into the steel floor in 7 perfect lines. 1. We watched. 2. We learned. 3. We copied. 4. We improved. 5. We restructured. 6. We called. 7. Now we become. Victor fell to his knees. The mirror chamber dimmed. Then pulsed. Once. Twice. Then a soft knock behind him. He turned, expecting a person. But there was only a mirror. On the back of the door. Where it had never been before. And on it, written in breath. We saved your name. Come claim it. Chapter 16, The Archivist. The library was locked by tradition, not key. Victor had to call in every favor left to his disgraced name, academic, forensic, archival, and even then, they only gave him 30 minutes. Sublevel 1C, the clerk said flatly, sliding a ring of outdated keys across the counter. Ask for the archivist. But don't ask twice. Victor didn't. The descent was long. Dust clung to the air like memory. The walls grew older as he walked, modern tiles fading to brick, then stone, then the polished bone-white marble of institutions that no longer admitted their own history. At the final door, a brass plaque. Restricted Materials, Catalog 1893, octave. Victor knocked once. The door creaked open before his knuckles touched wood again. The archivist was a thin man with a bent spine, white gloves, and eyes like dull glass. His voice was a whisper carved from centuries. "You've come about the spirals." Victor didn't respond. The archivist nodded anyway. "Then you know." The room beyond was round, windowless, filled floor to ceiling with filing cabinets and shelves of red-bound volumes. But in the center, lit by an oil lamp, sat a glass display case. Inside, a single human vertebra, cracked slightly across the edge. Etched into its surface in careful, looping script. VN. Dated, October 12, 1927. Victor's hands trembled. "That's impossible." The archivist nodded slowly. "Isn't it just?" He opened a locked drawer behind him and withdrew a leather portfolio. Inside were yellowed photographs, grainy but unmistakable. 7 victims. Each one posed in an eerily familiar configuration. Fetal. Prayer. Seated. Paired. Cruciform. Walking. Mirror. Each photo was labeled not with a name, but a symbol, a spiral, gradually tightening toward the center. Victor stared. "These are identical." "Not identical," the archivist whispered. "They're a rehearsal." "How was this never made public?" "Because the government sealed it. Back then, the press was easier to silence." The killer disappeared. No suspect. No trial. No name. The archivist hesitated. Then pulled out one final document. A page from a bound journal, written in red ink. At the bottom, signed Elias R. Victor read aloud. "He called us monsters. But we were not the ones who named the bones. He was. And so he gave us permission to arrange them." He looked up. "How did you get this?" The archivist turned away. "I didn't. It was delivered here last month." Victor froze. "What?" "Left outside the archive, sealed in a box with a wax stamp. No return address. We thought it was just another old donation." "But it wasn't old," Victor said. "It was from the present." "Or the future," the archivist whispered. "Depending on how long you've been inside the spiral." Victor took the vertebra, still locked behind glass. "I need this." "You already have it," the archivist said. "I'm asking to remove it." "I mean you already have it, Dr. Brandt." "What?" "Look." The archivist handed him a magnifying lens and turned the glass case. On the back of the vertebra, hidden from the front. Another inscription. Smaller. Not in Violet's hand. Etched in the same sharp-angled script Victor used in his youth. "The final bone is yours. A.V. Anselm Vane." Victor's original name. The one he thought buried. He stumbled back, breath stolen. "This can't be." The archivist bowed his head. "Time doesn't walk in lines, Dr. Brandt. It spirals. And eventually, every witness becomes part of the altar." Chapter 17, The Flesh That Didn't Burn. The call came at dawn. Victor hadn't slept. He sat in his car outside the university library, staring at the vertebra from the archive, the weight of it somehow heavier than its size. The message from Mariana was brief. Another one. Alive, but not. He didn't ask for clarification. He drove. Location, storage warehouse, District 5. Status, active scene. Access, restricted. Victor arrived to find the area cordoned off, hazmat suits milling through pools of fluorescent lighting. The air reeked of ammonia, burnt copper, and something else, sterile panic. Mariana met him at the edge of the entrance ramp, her face pale, jaw set hard. This one's different. Define different. She pulled back the curtain. Victor stepped inside. And froze. The body lay on a steel table. Male. Mid-30s. Skin intact. Eyes wide open. Mouth agape. Pupils dilated fully, as though screaming in a lightless void. The entire back had been exposed, not flayed, not opened. Evacuated. From the base of the skull to the tailbone, the spine was gone. Not severed. Absent. As if it had never been there to begin with. Victor approached slowly. No surgical scars. The forensics tech shook her head. None. No entry wound. No blood loss. No bruising. What's holding him up? Muscle tissue. Nerve bands. But it shouldn't be possible. The body should have collapsed. 'Cause of death. We're not sure he's dead. Victor turned sharply. Excuse me. He's warm. Blood still in place. No lividity. Cells aren't breaking down. Brain activity. Flat. But something strange. She held up an X-ray. Victor leaned in. No spine. But inside the skull, just behind the left orbital cavity, was a metallic fragment. Surgically inserted. A sliver of mirror. Mariana stepped beside him. What does it mean? Victor's voice was low. They took the ladder. What ladder? He turned to her slowly. The spine. The column. In mysticism, it's the ladder between self and soul. Between consciousness and memory. Between what we are and what we become. He stared back at the body. This isn't a murder. This is a sacrifice. One of the techs called from across the room. We found something. Victor crossed to where she stood, near a wall of crates. There, scrawled in white paint, barely visible under a layer of dust. We took the ladder so he would stop climbing. And this, the tech added, was hidden behind the crate. She handed Victor a photograph. It showed the current victim, but before. Smiling. Wearing a university ID badge. On it. Elias Renner. Student, Psychology. Class of 2015. Victor dropped the photo. That's not possible. Why? Because Elias Renner vanished 6 years ago. Mariana stared at him. You think this is the same Elias? I know it is. But then who left the tape? Who sent the lectures? Who called you, Witness Zero? Victor didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the body. Bent closer. Looked into the vacant mouth. And saw scratched into the back of the tongue. One voice. Many faces. Back at his apartment that night, Victor laid out everything on the floor. Photos. Bones. Symbols. Names. The patterns no longer ran linear. They spiraled inward. The message was becoming a machine. At precisely 3 a.m., the lights flickered. His computer turned on by itself. A file appeared on screen. Just one. ladder_down.json. He opened it. It contained no code. Just text. A single sentence. Every witness becomes the altar. Every altar becomes the door. Victor whispered into the empty room. And what comes through the door? His phone buzzed once. A voicemail. No number. A child's voice. Again. You did. Chapter 18, Pattern, Interrupted. It was the first scene that didn't feel sacred. No symmetry. No symbolism. No spiral. Just a mess. The call came from a civilian, an anonymous tip delivered through a garbled payphone voicemail at 2:58 a.m. He's in the library. Lower level. Broken. The address was familiar. Victor had spent years in that library. Teaching. Writing. Disappearing. He arrived at 3:14 a.m., 14 minutes late. That mattered. The bone hour was precise. Controlled. Ritualized. But this scene. It looked more like a murder than a message. The victim lay face down across the floor of a private reading room. Blood everywhere. Actual blood, not symbolic absence. Torn paper scattered around him like shredded scripture. A single broken arm stretched toward the center of the room, where a circle of candles had been placed, but never lit. Mariana arrived a minute later, breathless. She stared at the chaos. What the hell happened here? Victor didn't respond immediately. He knelt beside the body, brow furrowed. This wasn't part of the plan. You mean the killer made a mistake? No, he said slowly. They wanted it to look like a mistake. The body was male. Unknown. No ID. But there was something different. Inside the victim's jacket pocket, Victor found a letter. Folded. Clean. Dry. The envelope was sealed with black wax, spiral stamped. He broke it open. Inside, a single page. Typed. This one broke the sequence. He did not believe. He did not listen. He tried to remember who he was too early. So we removed him. On the back, in red ink. Witness 6 was not ready. Mariana stood over Victor's shoulder. Witness 6. What does that mean? The killer never referred to victims as victims. They were always arrangements. Designs. Chapters. So now we're seeing failed chapters. We're seeing control. Isn't that what we've always seen? Victor shook his head. Before, there was beauty. Now, there's desperation. He looked back at the candles. 7, arranged in a circle. But one was missing. Only 6 remained. And at the center, written in charcoal on the floor. He tried to skip the mirror. Victor stood up. His voice was steady, but tight. They're not just choosing people. They're building a sequence of selves. And this one? Mariana asked. Tried to step out of line. Later, in the forensics report, something else surfaced. Beneath the blood, burned into the victim's back. A mirrored version of Victor's spiral symbol. Twisted inward instead of outward. Not the spiral of becoming. But the spiral of collapse. Victor's hands trembled. They're not just arranging others. They're testing replacements. That night, he walked alone. Back to the first scene. David Weir's apartment. He stood where the bed used to be, where the fetal pose began. The room had been cleared, cleaned, painted over. But when he tapped his cane against the floorboards, he heard hollow wood. He pried it open. Inside, buried beneath the boards, a second envelope. This one dated a year before Weir died. Inside, a photo of Victor. Speaking at a lecture. A red spiral drawn over his mouth. And beneath it. You were the pattern's first interruption. You were never meant to become. Chapter 19, The Bone Garden. The floor of St. Aldrich's Cathedral had always been unstable. After the fire 20 years ago, engineers declared the site unsafe, multiple collapses, old foundation damage, unmarked crypts. The church was sealed. Forgotten. But Victor remembered the original plans. He once taught a class in sacred architecture. He knew that beneath the nave, beneath the apse, there was a second chapel. One built for the clergy only. Never on public record. They didn't worship at the altar, Victor murmured, staring at the cracked tiles. They buried something beneath it. Mariana stood beside him, flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. "You're saying the killer's been going underground?" "Not the killer," Victor replied. "The choir. They found the hidden trapdoor beneath the altar itself." The stone circle lifted with surprising ease. A rusted spiral staircase led down into darkness. Victor didn't hesitate. He descended. The air grew thick. Not musty. Not moldy. Organic. Like soil, rot, and memory. At the bottom, the flashlight beam hit marble. But it wasn't a crypt. It was a greenhouse. A vast underground vault, at least 30 meters wide, filled with rows of bone-filled beds. Not coffins. Not graves. Planters. The bones weren't arranged for ritual or display. They were buried upright, femurs and spines sticking out of the soil like stems. Pelvises packed like roots. Skulls balanced on thin copper rods, mouths open to the low-hanging lights. Each one had a small brass plaque in front of it. Each one engraved with a name. And a future date. Mariana's breath hitched. "Victor, these aren't victims." "No," he whispered. "They're versions." He knelt beside one of the planters. The plaque read, "Victor Brandt, bloom date, April 17, 2027. He moved to the next row. Violet Newman, bloom date, March 12, 2026. Another. Witness 4, bloom date, January 1, 2028. Mariana moved to a back wall, where a pedestal stood beneath a stained glass window that should not have been visible, no light source, and yet it glowed. On the pedestal, a watering can. Filled with dark, iron-scented liquid. Victor approached the skull closest to the glass. And then he saw it. From the top of the skull, a thin vine had sprouted. Coiled. Pale green. Veined with red. It was growing through the mouth, down into the throat, wrapping the ribs from the inside. "They're not killing," he whispered. "They're cultivating." He picked up a small journal that had been resting beneath the vine-covered skull. Its pages were brittle. Red-inked. He flipped to the center. "Not all life grows from life. Some must grow from the arrangement of endings. The spiral is a root system. The bones are the soil. The mind is the flower." Mariana called out from the far wall. "Victor." He turned. She was standing before a massive mirror, one that hadn't been there before. It wasn't hung. It was growing out of the wall. Its surface rippled like oil. And etched into the glass in reversed script. "This is the nursery." Below it, a second phrase. "You cannot stop what has already bloomed." Victor approached. And saw his own face reflected in the glass. But not as he was. Older. Paler. Eyes black as ink. Behind his reflection, 7 figures stood in perfect formation. Hooded. Silent. Watching. Then, from the ceiling, a soft drip. Victor looked up. A crack in the stone. And from it, a single red flower fell. It landed in his hand. Warm. Beating. Alive. Chapter 20, The Hour Approaches Again. It began with a single sentence. Typed and left in Victor's apartment while he slept. Return to the house. We kept it exactly as you left it. No signature. Just a spiral printed in faint watermark behind the text. Victor stood before the house with Mariana at dusk. The light was the same shade of ash it had been 6 years ago, when Violet Newman vanished without a trace, somewhere behind those windows. He hadn't returned since. Not after the investigation failed. Not after the press buried the story. Not after the university quietly urged him to take indefinite leave. Now, he could see it again for what it was. Not a house. A mirror. And inside? The hour. "You don't have to go in," Mariana said softly. "I already did," Victor replied. 6 years ago. He pushed the door open. It was unlocked. The house was immaculate. As if no time had passed. Furniture in the same positions. Dustless. Curtains drawn exactly halfway. A teacup on the side table, still bearing the ring of lipstick, Violet's. And on the wall, above the fireplace, a new mirror. This one wasn't cracked. Not aged. Not dusty. It was alive. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if breathing in time with Victor's pulse. He moved through the rooms one by one. Each one held a memory. The kitchen, where they'd argued about theory. The stairwell, where he found her notebook, pages torn out. The upstairs room, where the air always felt too still, like something had held its breath, and never let it go. He paused in the hallway outside her study. The door was closed. But light leaked from underneath it. He reached for the handle. Paused. "The last time I opened this door," he said quietly, "she was inside. Writing something she refused to show me. And when I blinked, she was gone." Mariana placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we open it together." They turned the knob. Inside the study, time had fractured. Books floated gently in mid-air, pages turning themselves. Chalk drifted through the air in curls, forming spirals before vanishing into dust. And on the desk, a photograph. Still developing. Victor picked it up. It showed the two of them, Victor and Mariana, standing in the room as they were now, only behind them. 7 shadows. No features. Only hoods. And one, in the center, held a mirror where its face should be. On the back of the photo. "The spiral is not a path. It is a room. And you've been living inside it since the day you opened the first file." Suddenly, every clock in the house began to tick. All in sync. All moving faster. Until they froze, at once, on 3 a.m. The bone hour. The mirror on the fireplace shimmered violently and then opened. Not with sound. With absence. As if light had been swallowed in reverse. Inside it, not reflection. A hallway of bones. Lining the walls. And at the end. A door. Victor stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost reverent. "This is the last room." Mariana grabbed his hand. "What if you don't come back out? Then follow the spiral. It'll know how to find me." He crossed the threshold. And the mirror sealed behind him. Chapter 21, The Collector of Silence. Victor walked through bone. The corridor behind the mirror was impossibly long, yet his steps made no sound. The walls weren't just lined with bones, they were constructed from them. Each vertebra, each rib, each femur, interlocked like cathedral masonry. And embedded in the marrow-white structure were mirrors, hundreds of them, fractured and incomplete. In each one, a reflection of someone he used to be. Victor the lecturer. Victor the cynic. Victor the believer. Anselm Vane. Witness Zero. The boy who watched his mother fall down the stairs and never told a soul. "You are every room you've forgotten," the walls seemed to whisper. "And every silence you refuse to break." At the end of the corridor stood a massive door, not made of bone, but of fleshless branches, bound with black wire, woven into the shape of a spiral. He reached out. The door uncoiled at his touch. And opened. The chamber beyond was vast. A dome, seemingly without ceiling or floor. The air was dense, velvet thick, soaked in memory and reverence. At the center stood a raised platform of bone and glass, shaped like a blooming flower. Upon it, a throne. And seated in it, the collector of silence. He wore no mask. He needed none. His face was not blank, it was layered. Every few seconds, it shifted, flickering between identities. Young man. Old woman. Blind child. Victor. Violet. Elias. Unknown faces. All of them, speaking without sound. Victor stepped closer. Are you Elias? The collector tilted its head. A dozen mouths moved. No words came out. Then, on the far wall, a mirror lit up. A phrase appeared on it in red script. Elias was an echo. You are the voice. Victor's heart raced. I'm not the voice, he whispered. I'm the interruption. The collector stood. Its footsteps made no sound, and yet the room seemed to quake with each movement. As it approached, mirrors shattered, not from impact, but from recognition. And then, it reached out. Touched Victor's forehead with one finger. And silence flooded his skull. But it wasn't empty. Inside the silence, Victor saw Violet, laughing, her mouth filled with vines. The bone garden in bloom, flowering spines, whispering in unison. A fetus posed in ritual, unraveling into a ring of keys. His own face, not older, but recursive, echoing into infinite copies of himself, each holding a different truth. The collector whispered, not with sound, but directly into Victor's bones. You believed death was the ending. We know better. We do not kill. We curate. We arrange what breaks, so it may be reborn correctly. Victor fell to his knees. Why me? The mirrors dimmed. And one final message appeared. Because you listened. Before anyone else. You heard the silence. And called it a pattern. The collector held out its hand. In it, a vertebra, fresh, white, and carved. Victor took it. Etched along its surface were 4 words. This one is yours. As Victor turned to leave, the bone pulsed once in his hand. He glanced back. The collector had vanished. And the throne stood empty. But growing from its base was a new flower. And it was blooming in his shape. Chapter 22, The Final Bone. Victor returned at dawn. He walked through the university gates barefoot, his coat trailing behind him, the vertebra clenched in one hand. The guard on duty said he didn't speak. Just nodded once, as if remembering a promise he'd never made. By 10 a.m., every major forensic division in the city was notified. He left a message, Mariana told them. But it's not for us. Location, Victor Brandt's apartment. Mariana entered alone. No sign of struggle. No sign of life. No Victor. Instead, 7 mirrors. Arranged in a circle. Each cracked in a single line. At their center, a table. On the table, bones. Not arranged as a body, but as a spiral. Laid perfectly from a single vertebra outward. And at the center, a photograph. Victor. Seated in the throne of the bone garden. Smiling. There was a note beside the photograph. Written in Victor's hand. Simple. Clean. Final. I am not leaving behind a body. I am leaving behind an answer. The spiral on the table wasn't just symbolic. It matched the exact neural mapping of the hippocampus. Victor had taken his own mental process, his architecture of thought, and translated it into a pose. He hadn't posed a corpse. He had posed a consciousness. Forensics confirmed. The bones weren't human. They were sculpted. Each one cast in a new alloy, lightweight, marrowless, and engraved with microglyphs in a code no one could read. Except Mariana. She returned to the cathedral that night. Walked beneath the altar. Back into the bone garden. Where a new row had formed. 7 fresh plaques. Each one named after a phase of the self. 1. Witness. 2. Echo. 3. Mirror. 4. Seed. 5. Voice. 6. Choir. 7. Collector. And beside them, an 8th. Not engraved. Not etched. Empty. Waiting. She left the vertebra Victor gave her there. Laid it gently in the soil. And as she did, a vine curled upward from the ground and wound itself around the bone. Breathing. Beating. Alive. Back in the city, news outlets speculated for days. Disgraced psychologist vanishes in ritualistic event. The Brandt spiral, art, madness, or code. What is the bone hour? But none of them understood the message. None of them heard what wasn't said. Only Mariana stood before the empty mirror in Victor's study and read the inscription he'd left for her, invisible until now. Etched in steam. It is not a spiral if you escape. She whispered into the silence. You didn't vanish. You just bloomed. Epilogue, a voice among bones. The recorder clicks on. Not by hand. By ritual. A static hum rises. Faint. Like breath held in a long hallway. Then a voice. New. Feminine. Calm. You don't know me. But I was there. Every time you described a bone. Every time you named a pose. Every time you thought you were alone. Sound of pages turning. A pen scratches on paper. The voice continues. I was the archivist before he remembered the word. I was the photographer before he saw the scene. I was the seed. But he wasn't the first to bloom. A soft click. A drawer opens. Fabric shifts. The sound of a mirror cracking. Victor was your witness. But I am your echo. And now that he's been curated, it's time I begin collecting. Silence. Then, footsteps. Light. Deliberate. And a final whisper. See you at the next bone hour.
Every mystery leaves a mark. And the next case is already unfolding. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe, like, and share. There are more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Join us in the next chapter of A Study in Secrets.